They labeled her a witch and set the fire, until the gunslinger rode through flames. The town was small, quiet, and surrounded by dry land and narrow roads. Everyone knew everyone else, and secrets did not last long there. Life moved slowly, and people followed the same rules their parents and grandparents had followed. Change was not welcome. Anything different made people uncomfortable, and discomfort often turned into fear. She had lived on the edge of town for many years. No one remembered exactly when she arrived. Some said she came after a long journey. Others believed she had always been there, living quietly without drawing attention. Her house was simple, made of wood and stone, with a small garden where she grew plants. She spoke politely, never raised her voice, and kept mostly to herself. That alone made people uneasy. She knew a lot about plants, roots, and natural remedies. When someone had a fever or pain, she could make a drink that helped. When a child cried through the night, she had leaves that brought calm. At first, people were grateful. They knocked on her door in secret, usually at night, so others would not see them. They thanked her with food or small favors. She never asked for money. Helping others seemed enough for her, but kindness can be forgotten quickly when fear appears. One year, the weather changed. Rain came late, and when it did come, it was weak. Crops did not grow well. Animals became thin. Soon after, sickness spread through the town. It was not deadly, but it was stubborn. People grew tired, weak, and angry. They wanted answers. They wanted someone to blame. Whispers began quietly, like wind moving through dry grass. Someone said it was strange that she knew so much about sickness. Another said her plants smelled unusual. A man claimed he saw strange lights near her home late at night, though no one else ever did. Stories grew each time they were told. The truth did not matter anymore. She noticed the change before anyone spoke to her directly. People stopped greeting her on the road. Mothers pulled their children closer when she passed. Doors closed faster. Eyes followed her movements with suspicion instead of gratitude. Still, she stayed calm. She had seen fear before in other places in other times. She believed it would pass. It did not. One morning, a child fell ill and did not recover as quickly as expected. The family had once been helped by her remedies, but this time they panicked. Instead of patience, they chose anger. They told others that her help had failed. Someone added that maybe she wanted the child to suffer. Another voice said maybe she caused the sickness in the first place. By sunset, her name was spoken with caution. By the next day, it was spoken with blame. The town leaders were not wise men. They were men who feared losing control. They saw the tension growing and decided it was better to direct it somewhere else. Instead of calming the people, they allowed the rumors to grow. It was easier to point at one quiet woman than to admit they had no answers. They called a meeting in the open square. People gathered, their faces tired and hard. When her name was spoken aloud, the crowd grew louder. Words filled the air, sharp and careless. No one asked her to speak. No one wanted to hear her side. In their minds, the story was already written. She stood at the edge of the crowd, listening. Her heart was heavy, but her face remained still. She understood what was happening. Fear had chosen her. Someone shouted that she was dangerous. Someone else said she brought bad luck. The old gratitude was gone, buried under panic and false certainty. The leaders nodded, pretending to listen while guiding the crowd toward one clear idea. She was the cause of their troubles. By nightfall, the word spread beyond the square. It followed her through the streets, growing darker with every step. Children repeated it without knowing its meaning. Adults whispered it as if it were truth. That single label erased everything she had ever done. She returned to her home quietly. She packed nothing. There was nowhere to go. Leaving would only prove their fears in their minds. Staying was dangerous, but running would make her guilt certain to them. She chose to stay. That night she did not sleep. She sat by the window, listening to the sounds of the town she had once helped. Dogs barked, footsteps passed by, voices rose and fell. Each sound carried tension. She felt like the town itself was holding its breath. Memories filled her mind. Other places, other faces, other times when fear had turned people against someone they did not understand. She had hoped this place would be different. For a while it had been. As dawn approached, the air felt heavy. The sky was pale and the wind carried dust. She stepped outside to tend to her plants, trying to hold on to routine, but even the birds were quiet. That was when they came. A group of townspeople approached her home, not rushing but not gentle either. Their faces were firm, their eyes filled with something cold. No one met her gaze for long. The leaders stood behind them, silent but approving. They did not shout at first. They told her she needed to answer questions. They said the town needed protection. They spoke as if the decision had already been made. She realized then that this was not about truth. It was about control and fear. She spoke calmly. She said she had only helped when asked. She said sickness came from many causes. Her words fell flat. The crowd did not hear her. They were listening only to their own fear. Hands grabbed her arms. She did not fight. Fighting would only feed the story they had created. As they led her away, she saw familiar faces, people she had once helped. Some looked away. Some looked ashamed. None stepped forward. The square was different in the morning light. What had once been a place of trade and laughter now felt harsh and empty. People gathered quickly, drawn by curiosity and anger. The air buzzed with tension. They spoke of punishment. They spoke of cleansing the town of evil. Big words spoken by small minds. No one questioned how quickly the town had turned against one of its own. She stood there bound by fear more than rope. Inside, she felt sadness not for herself but for them. Fear had taken their reason. Once that happens, it is hard to return. As the sun climbed higher, the crowd grew. The story grew with it. Each new listener heard a darker version than the last. Truth had no place anymore. She lifted her eyes to the sky for a moment. The clouds moved slowly, unaware of human cruelty. She breathed deeply, steadying herself. Whatever came next, she would face it with dignity. And somewhere far beyond the town, unseen and unheard, the world continued to move, unaware that fear had just marked another innocent soul. This was only the beginning. Morning light filled the town square, but it did not bring warmth. The people gathered early, drawn by rumor and worry. Faces looked tight and tired, as if everyone had carried a heavy load through the night. The woman stood near the center, watched from every side. No one offered her water. No one asked if she was afraid. Silence wrapped around her, thick and uncomfortable. The leaders arrived together. They stood higher than the rest, not because they were wiser, but because the crowd allowed them to stand there. They spoke slowly, using serious voices as if careful words could hide careless thoughts. They said the town needed answers. They said safety came first. They said fear had to be removed. Each sentence sounded calm, but each one pushed the crowd closer to a single choice. They did not call it a trial. They called it a hearing. Yet there were no questions meant to understand, only statements meant to confirm what had already been decided. One man spoke about the poor harvest. Another spoke about the sickness. A third said strange things happened after the woman arrived years ago. None of them offered proof. The crowd did not ask for any. She listened quietly. When she tried to speak, her voice was calm and clear. She said the land had suffered before. She said sickness came and went in cycles. She said she never forced help on anyone. Her words were simple, honest, and patient. They landed softly, then disappeared into the noise of fear. People began to speak from the crowd. Some shouted, some cried. A few spoke with shaking voices, unsure of their own words. Stories changed as they were told. What began as doubt turned into certainty. What began as worry turned into anger. Each person added something, making the story feel bigger and more real than it truly was. The leaders nodded at the loudest voices. They ignored the quiet ones. When a man tried to remind others that she had helped his family before, His words were pushed aside. Someone told him he was confused. Someone else told him he was lucky nothing bad had happened to him yet. He fell silent, ashamed and afraid. The woman noticed how quickly people learned to protect themselves by staying quiet. She did not blame them. Fear can teach silence better than kindness ever could. The leaders spoke again. They said the town could not risk waiting. They said strong action would bring peace. They said the past no longer mattered. Only the future did. Their words sounded important, but they were empty. The crowd wanted a solution, and the leaders offered one that required no patience, no effort, and no responsibility. The decision was announced as if it were fair. The woman was declared a danger to the town. There was no vote. There was no pause. The crowd reacted with a strange mix of relief and excitement. Choosing someone to blame felt easier than facing the truth. She was moved to the side of the square. Ropes were brought out not with urgency but with purpose. People avoided looking at her face. It was easier to believe she was something else if they did not see her eyes. Time passed slowly. The sun rose higher. Dust drifted through the air. A few people left, uncomfortable with what was happening. Others arrived, curious to see the outcome. Children climbed onto crates to get a better view, not fully understanding what they were watching. The woman stood still. Her hands were tied loosely, more as a symbol than a restraint. She did not struggle. Inside, her thoughts moved steadily. She thought of the road that had brought her here. She thought of other towns, other faces. She remembered promises she had made to herself long ago about staying calm when fear ruled others. A man stepped forward, someone she recognized. She had helped his wife during a hard winter. He would not meet her eyes. He spoke about how strange she was, about how little she shared of her past. His voice shook, not with anger but with guilt. The crowd accepted his words anyway. Guilt did not matter when fear was hungry. The leaders asked if anyone wished to speak in her defense. The square fell silent. Not because there was nothing to say, but because saying it felt dangerous. Silence answered for everyone. That silence sealed her fate. Work began quickly after that. People gathered wood from nearby sheds and fences. They stacked it carefully as if building something important. No one spoke about what it was for, yet everyone knew. The task gave the crowd something to do, something to focus on. Action felt better than doubt. The woman watched as the structure took shape. She did not look away. She wanted to remember every face, not out of anger but out of understanding. These were ordinary people, driven by fear and led by weak authority. Monsters were rarely born. They were made in moments like this. A woman from the crowd stepped forward with a cloth. She wrapped it around the accused woman's shoulders, not tightly, just enough to offer warmth. Their eyes met briefly. In that moment, something like regret passed between them. Then the woman stepped back, swallowed by the crowd again. The leaders gave instructions, careful to keep their hands clean. Others followed them. Responsibility spread so thin that no one felt fully guilty. That was how the town protected itself. As the structure grew taller, the air seemed to change. The sounds of the town faded. Even the birds kept their distance. The woman felt a strange calm settle over her. Fear no longer had power over her. It belonged to the crowd now. She spoke once more, not loudly but clearly. She said she forgave them. The words confused people. Some laughed nervously, some looked away. Forgiveness did not fit the story they had chosen. It made them uncomfortable. The leaders quickly spoke over her, reminding everyone why they were there. They repeated the same claims, louder this time. Repetition made lies feel solid. The crowd nodded along. By late afternoon, everything was ready. The sun burned overhead and shadows stretched long across the square. The woman was guided closer to the center. Hands shook as ropes were adjusted. No one wanted to be the one to do it, but someone always did. She closed her eyes briefly, then opened them again. She refused to give the crowd the comfort of seeing her break. Strength, even quiet strength, can challenge fear. Around her, the town waited. Some waited for justice. Some waited for peace. Others waited only for it to be over. Few understood that what they were doing would follow them long after the square was empty. As evening approached, the leaders announced that the town would be cleansed by action. Their words echoed hollowly against the buildings. No cheers followed, only heavy silence and restless movement. The woman lifted her head and looked beyond the crowd, toward the road that led away from the town. Dust drifted there, carried by a gentle wind. She felt a strange sense of certainty, though she did not know why. The sky darkened slowly, clouds gathering in the distance. The air grew thick. The town stood on the edge of something it could not undo, and as shadows stretched across the square, fate prepared to change its course, unseen by those who believed the story was already finished. The sky slowly turned darker as the sun moved lower. Clouds gathered quietly, stretching wide like a heavy blanket over the town. The air felt thick, and breathing seemed harder than before. People shifted their feet, waiting, unsure of what they were truly waiting for. No one spoke much now. Words had already done enough damage. The woman stood where they had placed her. The wood around her was dry and rough, stacked carefully by hands that avoided touching her. She felt its presence but did not focus on it. Her mind stayed calm, almost distant, as if she were watching the moment from far away. Fear knocked at her heart, but she did not open the door. The leaders stepped back, leaving the final act to others. This distance gave them comfort. They could later say they did not take part directly. The crowd understood this silent message. Responsibility belonged to everyone and no one at the same time. A hush spread across the square. Even children grew quiet, sensing that something serious was about to happen. The wind moved gently, carrying dust and the smell of dry earth. Somewhere, a door creaked. Somewhere else, a dog whimpered and was quickly pulled away. Someone moved forward with a small flame. Their hands trembled. They paused, hoping someone else would take the task. No one did. All eyes were fixed on the same point, as if looking away might break the spell holding them together. The woman lifted her face and looked out over the crowd. She saw fear, guilt, doubt, and stubborn pride. She saw people who would later remember this day and wish they could change it. She held no anger toward them. Anger would only tie her to their mistake. As the flame touched the wood, a soft crackle filled the air. It was quiet at first, almost harmless. A few people took a step back. Others leaned forward, drawn by the moment. The leaders watched closely, their faces unreadable. Smoke began to rise, thin and gray. It moved slowly, twisting upward, carried by the wind. The smell reached the crowd, sharp and uncomfortable. Some people covered their mouths. Others told themselves it was necessary. The woman closed her eyes for a moment, not in surrender but in focus. She controlled her breathing, steady and slow. Her thoughts stayed clear. She reminded herself who she was, beyond the story they had created. No label could change that. The sound of crackling grew louder. The heat became noticeable, pressing against the air. The crowd shifted again. Murmurs passed quietly from person to person. A few people turned away, unable to watch any longer. Others stayed, frozen by the weight of what they were part of. The smoke thickened, rising higher into the darkening sky. It blurred the edges of the square, softening faces and buildings alike. The town looked different now, almost unreal, as if wrapped in a dream it could not wake from. The woman opened her eyes and looked toward the road once more. The wind shifted slightly, and for a moment the smoke parted just enough to reveal the path leading out of town. It stretched empty and quiet, disappearing into the distance. Then, faintly at first, a sound reached the edge of the square. It was not loud, it was not sudden, it was steady. Hooves. At first, only a few people noticed. They frowned, confused, unsure if they had imagined it. The crackling of wood and the movement of the crowd made it easy to doubt one's senses. But the sound continued, growing clearer with each passing second. Someone turned their head toward the road. Then another. A ripple of attention moved through the crowd, breaking their focus. The leaders glanced at one another, irritation flickering across their faces. The hooves came closer, slow but certain. Each step sounded strong and controlled, not rushed, not afraid. The wind carried the sound through the smoke, cutting through the tension like a blade through cloth. The woman heard it too. Her heart stirred, not with hope exactly, but with awareness. Something had changed. The moment was no longer sealed. As the sound grew louder, the crowd began to shift more noticeably. People stepped aside, creating a narrow opening without realizing they were doing it. Curiosity mixed with fear. No one spoke. They waited. Out of the haze, a shape appeared. A horse moved forward, calm despite the smoke and heat. Its rider sat tall, his outline sharp against the fading light. His coat was dark, worn by long travel. Dust and ash clung to it, but he did not slow. The crowd parted fully now, instinct guiding them where reason had failed. The rider passed through the space they made, his eyes steady, his expression unreadable. He did not shout. He did not threaten. He did not explain. His presence alone shifted the balance. The leaders stepped forward, trying to speak, but their voices felt weak in the open air. Words stumbled and fell apart before reaching the rider. He raised one hand slightly, not in warning but in calm control. Silence followed. The horse stopped near the center of the square. Heat shimmered around them. Smoke drifted past, but neither rider nor horse seemed disturbed. The animal stood firm, trained and trusting. The rider looked at the woman. Their eyes met. In that moment, nothing else existed. No crowd, no leaders, no fire, just recognition. He dismounted smoothly and stepped forward. The crowd held its breath. No one moved to stop him. Fear, once so loud, now felt small and unsure. He walked toward her without hesitation. The heat pressed close, sparks rising into the air. Still he moved as if walking through a quiet field. When he reached her, he did not rush. He did not show anger. He reached for the ropes calmly, hands steady. Someone from the crowd tried to speak, to object, but the words died in their throat. Authority had shifted, not by force but by certainty. The rider loosened the ropes, careful not to hurt her. She stepped forward as they fell away. The crowd gasped softly, the sound spreading like a wave. The rider placed himself between her and the heat, his body forming a shield. Sparks floated around them, glowing briefly before fading into the night. The horse stepped closer, standing protectively at his side. The leaders tried again to speak, to regain control. Their voices cracked, their arguments thin. The rider turned his head slowly and looked at them. That single look carried more weight than all their speeches combined. He did not need to explain. He did not need permission. The woman stepped beside him, steady on her feet. Smoke clung to her clothes, but her posture was strong. She looked out at the crowd once more. This time, she saw something new, uncertainty. The crackling behind them faded as attention shifted fully to the unexpected arrival. The moment the town thought it controlled had slipped from its grasp. The rider guided her toward his horse. The crowd stepped back, clearing the way. No one reached out. No one tried to stop them. Fear had changed direction. As they moved, the wind picked up slightly, pushing the smoke away from the square. The sky above seemed wider, lighter. The town stood silent, watching as the story they believed in broke apart before their eyes. The woman placed her hand on the horse's side and felt its warmth and strength. She did not look back as the rider helped her up. There was nothing left for her there. Behind them, the fire weakened, unattended. The structure stood incomplete, its purpose lost. People would remember that image for years, the moment everything stopped. Together, the rider and the woman turned toward the road. The hooves sounded again, slow and steady, moving away from the square. The crowd remained frozen, caught between relief and shame. They had no cheer, no anger left, only silence and questions. As the figures disappeared into the darkening distance, the town was left with smoke, shadows, and the weight of what nearly happened. And though night fully settled over the square, the flames of fear had already begun to die. The road away from the town stretched quietly under the dark sky. The horse moved at a steady pace, its hooves landing softly on the dirt. Smoke from the square still hung faintly in the air behind them, but it grew thinner with every step forward. The woman sat straight, holding onto the saddle, feeling the movement beneath her. Her body was tired, but her mind felt strangely clear. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The rider guided the horse with ease as if the road was familiar to him. He did not rush. He did not look back. His calm felt solid, like something that could not be shaken easily. That calm slowly reached her as well. The town faded into darkness behind them. Its sounds disappeared, replaced by the quiet of open land. Crickets began to sing. The wind moved gently through dry grass. The night felt wide and open, very different from the tight fear of the square. After a while, the woman spoke softly. She thanked him, not with long words but with simple honesty. He nodded, as if thanks were not necessary. He said he had seen towns like that before. Fear traveled faster than truth, and sometimes it took a stranger to stop it. They continued riding until they reached a small clearing near a line of trees. The rider guided the horse to a stop and helped her down. The ground felt firm under her feet. She stood there for a moment, adjusting to the stillness. The night air was cool against her skin, calming and clean. He made a small fire a safe distance away, just enough to give warmth and light. The flame was gentle, nothing like the harsh heat she had left behind. She sat near it, watching the light dance quietly. The rider checked the horse, then sat across from her, resting easily. In the soft glow, she could see his face more clearly. Lines marked it, signs of long roads and hard choices. His eyes were watchful but kind. He looked like someone who had seen many endings and learned not to fear them. She told him a little about herself. Not everything, just enough. She spoke about her knowledge of plants, about helping where she could, about moving on when places no longer felt safe. She did not speak with bitterness. She spoke as someone who had accepted the world as it was, not as it should be. He listened without interrupting. When she finished, he said the world often punished those who lived quietly and did not fit easy stories. People preferred simple answers even when they were wrong. He said he had learned that lesson early in life. They sat in silence again, comfortable now. The fire crackled softly. Above them, stars filled the sky, bright and countless. The woman felt a weight lift from her chest. For the first time in many days, she breathed freely. As the night passed, they rested in turns. The rider stayed alert, used to keeping watch. The woman slept lightly but peacefully. Dreams came not of fear but of open paths and quiet mornings. At dawn, the sky softened from black to pale gray. Birds stirred in the trees. The rider woke her gently. He offered her food and water. Simple things, but they felt like gifts. She ate slowly, feeling strength return to her body. They spoke again as the sun rose. He asked where she wished to go. She did not have a clear answer. She only knew she could not stay near the town. He nodded, understanding. He said the road ahead crossed many places, some safer than others. He offered to travel with her for a while. She accepted without hesitation, not out of need alone but out of trust. Something about him felt steady, honest. He did not promise safety forever. He promised effort and awareness. That was enough. They continued their journey as the light grew stronger. The land opened up, wide fields stretching toward distant hills. The air smelled fresh. Each step forward felt like a small victory over what had nearly happened. As they traveled, the rider shared pieces of his own story. He spoke of places where people ruled by fear and places where kindness survived quietly. He spoke of moments when he had stepped in and moments when he had arrived too late. His voice carried no pride, only reflection. The woman listened carefully. She saw now that he carried his own weight just as she did. They were not saving each other. They were simply walking the same road for a time. By midday, they reached a small stream. Clear water moved gently over smooth stones. They stopped to rest. The woman knelt and washed her hands, feeling the cool water against her skin. It felt like a fresh beginning. As she looked into the water, she saw her reflection. Her face looked tired, but her eyes were strong. The label the town had placed on her felt distant now, weak and false. She knew who she was. That knowledge mattered more than anything else. They ate again and rested in the shade. The rider kept watch, scanning the land with practiced ease. The woman gathered a few safe plants near the stream, explaining their uses as she worked. He watched with interest, not suspicion. That difference meant more than words could express. When they resumed their journey, the road began to climb slightly. The view behind them widened. Far in the distance, the town was no longer visible. It felt as if it had never existed, like a bad dream fading with daylight. But the woman knew better. She knew places like that left marks, even when escaped. Still, she also knew those marks did not define her future. They were lessons, not chains. As the day passed, they spoke of practical things: where to find shelter, how to avoid trouble, which paths were safer. The rider's experience blended naturally with her knowledge. Together, they made careful choices. They encountered no one else that day. The road remained quiet. The silence felt protective rather than empty. Each mile put more distance between her and the fear she had survived. In the late afternoon, clouds gathered again, but these were gentle, promising cool air rather than danger. The rider suggested they stop near a group of trees before nightfall. The woman agreed. They worked together easily, setting up a small camp. As they sat by another small fire, the woman reflected on how quickly life could change. One moment, she had been surrounded by anger and false judgment. The next, she was sitting under an open sky, safe and free. She wondered what the town was doing now. She imagined the square empty, the structure unfinished, people returning to their homes with heavy thoughts. She did not wish them harm. She wished them understanding someday. The rider noticed her quiet and asked if she was thinking of going back. She shook her head. Some places were not meant to be returned to. He agreed. Night fell gently. Stars appeared once more. The fire glowed softly. The woman felt tired in a good way, the kind that comes from moving forward instead of standing still. Before sleeping, she thanked him again, more firmly this time. He told her she owed him nothing. Sometimes, he said, doing the right thing was payment enough. As she lay down, wrapped in warmth and quiet, she felt something she had not felt in a long time: hope. Not loud or bright, but steady and real. The road ahead was uncertain. There would be challenges. There always were. But she was no longer alone, and she was no longer trapped by fear. And as the night settled over the land, the path before them waited patiently, ready to carry them toward whatever came next. Morning came slowly, spreading soft light across the land. The woman woke before the rider, listening to the quiet sounds around them. Birds moved through the trees. The wind brushed gently against the leaves. For a moment she stayed still, letting the peace settle inside her. The fear that had once lived in her chest felt far away now, like a memory that no longer had power. She stood and stretched, feeling the strength returning to her body. The journey had been hard, but it had also reminded her of who she truly was. Not a name given by fear, not a story shaped by rumor. She was simply a woman who understood the land and wanted to help where she could. The rider woke soon after. He greeted the day with quiet readiness, the same calm that had carried them through the flames and onto the open road. They shared a simple meal and spoke about the path ahead. The road split further on, leading to different regions. One way led toward settled lands. The other led toward wide, open country. The woman looked toward the open land. She felt drawn to it. Places with space allowed people to breathe, to think, to live without too many rules shaped by fear. The rider nodded. He said those lands were not easy, but they were honest. They continued together for another day, walking and riding side by side. Along the way, they passed small farms and distant homes. People watched them from afar, cautious but curious. No one spoke harshly. No one pointed fingers. That simple difference felt like a gift. Near midday, they reached a small settlement by a river. People there lived simply, working together, sharing what they had. The woman noticed how neighbors spoke kindly to one another. There was caution, yes, but not cruelty. She felt something settle inside her. This place felt possible. They stayed for a short while. The woman helped with small tasks, using her knowledge of plants to treat minor aches and improve food storage. She worked openly without secrecy. The people watched, asked questions, and learned. There were no whispers, only conversation. The writer observed quietly. He could see the change in her posture, the ease returning to her movements. When evening came, he told her he would be moving on the next morning. His path led further west, where roads were rough and needed steady hands. She understood. Their journey together had never been meant to last forever. Some people walk with you just long enough to change your direction. She thanked him again, deeply this time. He told her she had already repaid him by choosing to live freely instead of hiding. That night they sat by the river, watching the water reflect the stars. The woman spoke of her hopes, not grand dreams but simple ones. A place to live quietly, people willing to listen. A life where knowledge was shared, not feared. The writer listened, then said something that stayed with her. He said fear survives where people stop asking questions, but where questions are welcomed, fear slowly fades. She smiled, knowing those words were true. At dawn, they parted ways. There were no long speeches, no heavy goodbyes, just a firm handshake and a shared understanding. The rider turned down the western road, his figure growing smaller with each step. She watched until he disappeared into the distance. Then she turned back toward the settlement by the river. Life there did not change overnight. Trust never does. But slowly, the people began to rely on her knowledge. She taught them which plants healed and which to avoid. She helped them learn when to rest the land and when to plant. She spoke clearly and honestly, never claiming more than she knew. Children followed her through fields, asking endless questions. She answered patiently, showing them how to listen to the land. Elders watched from a distance at first, then joined in. Knowledge stopped being something mysterious and became something shared. Stories about the town she had escaped never followed her there, or if they did, they lost their shape along the way. People judged her by her actions, not by rumors. That made all the difference. Seasons passed. The river rose and fell. Crops grew strong. Illness came and went as it always did, but fear no longer ruled the response. People worked together, learning patience and care. Sometimes at night, the woman thought of the town she had left behind. She imagined people remembering the day they almost lost themselves to fear. Perhaps some felt shame. Perhaps some learned. She hoped so, but she did not dwell on it. The past no longer owned her. One evening, a traveler passed through and spoke of a town not far away where people had begun to question old habits, where leaders listened more than they spoke, where fear had loosened its grip. The woman listened quietly, a small smile touching her lips. Change, she knew, moved slowly, but it moved. Years later, people would speak of her with respect, not as something strange or dangerous, but as someone who helped shape a better way of living. They would say she taught them to observe before judging, to ask before accusing, and to understand before reacting. As for the writer, she never saw him again, but sometimes travelers spoke of a lone figure moving through troubled places, stopping just long enough to tip the balance toward fairness. She hoped he was well. She believed he was. On a quiet morning, standing by the river with the sun warming her face, the woman realized something important. Survival was not just about escaping danger. It was about choosing what came next. She had chosen openness over fear, truth over rumor, and patience over anger. The road that once carried her away from flames had led her toward purpose. Not a loud purpose, not one carved into stone, but one lived every day through small actions and steady kindness. And though the world still held fear in many corners, her life stood as quiet proof that fear did not have to win. The past had tried to define her. It had failed. She belonged to the present now, and the future remained wide open and hers to walk.